Hey everyone, it's a little bit past 9 o'clock, so if everyone wants to begin taking their seats, we can get started in just a minute. Well, thank you all so much, and welcome everyone to the National Press Club. My name is Emily Wilkins. I am the 117th president of the National Press Club, as well as a correspondent for CNBC. Very much appreciate all of you in joining us on this incredibly important day and an incredibly important topic. You know, the first World Press Freedom Day actually took place right here at the well, not the first one, but the first one held in the U.S. took place here at the National Press Club in 2011. And so we're really grateful for all of you who have joined us both in person and online today. On one hand, this is a very exciting time with representatives from all over the world giving important and moving speeches. We salute our colleagues who are holding World Press Freedom Day ceremonies in Santiago, Chile, and all over the world. And today we will contribute to this discussion by getting the latest information on the 3 U.S. journalists who are wrongfully being held overseas. You know their names. Debra Tice, who worked for the Washington Post and McClatchy, has been held for nearly 12 years now in Syria. Gershkovich, a Wall Street Journal reporter who was taken in Russia 1 year and 2 months ago, and also Kremasheva, an editor at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, who has been held in Russia for more than 6 months. Each of these journalists has a unique story. We want you to really understand them, not just as journalists who are wrongfully detained, but also as people who need to get back to their families and their lives. We have brought an important advocate for each to visit with us today, and we look forward to you guys an update on their current status and what might be coming next. While today's event is about wrongfully detained American reporters, I would be really remiss if I did not recognize at this point these extraordinary circumstances that we find ourselves during this World Press Freedom Day, namely that journalists are being killed at an alarming and unprecedented rate. And this is particularly true, of course, for the Israel-Hamas war. At this point, in the 7 months since October 7th, nearly 100 journalists have been killed in this war. That is more than all of the journalists who were killed in the calendar year 2023. Today, we call for all parties to immediately stop the killing and targeting of journalists. We call on the U.S. government to use its significant influence to ensure the safety of reporters. In our support of journalism, we do not take sides, but we cannot ignore the facts. The vast majority of journalists who have died are Palestinian, and we know that some of them have been targeted by Israeli forces. And it's not just killings. Journalists are being wounded, they are being threatened, their families are being threatened. This is unacceptable, and this must stop now. Journalists also need to be granted access to report firsthand on what is happening on the ground and documenting what is happening in this war. Organizations like Al Jazeera are an important source of information and need to be able to continue to report during this important time. Israeli reporters have also been killed by Hamas, and we condemn these killings, notably a veteran photographer who just hours before his death was bravely documenting that horrific October 7th attack. As we face a possible final assault in Gaza, there are only a few journalists remaining on the ground who can document what's happening, and we ask for everyone that great care be taken to make sure that they are safe and that they're able to do their incredibly important work. Thank you so much, and with that, we're going to be turning our focus back to the detained journalists in the U.S., the focus of why we've all gathered here for today. And I'd like to start off by welcoming to the stage Debra Tice, Debra Tice's mom. Austin has been detained in Syria since 2012, and Debra, you have been so tirelessly leading the fight to bring him home. Your passion, your persistence, your determination has been incredibly inspiring to me, and I know many who know you as well. And so I welcome you to the stage to make a couple of remarks and then look forward to having a Q&A with you. Everyone, Debra Tice.
So first of all, of course, I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank everyone that's also joining us virtually. It's been 11 years, 8 months, and 1 week, 3 days since Austin was detained in Syria. We are not giving up on our efforts to bring him home. I know that many people feel that's a terribly long time, but it's not unusual in Syria for people to be detained in silence for a very long time. So thank you again. Thank you so much, Emily, for taking this time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deborah. I think we have some mics coming up. Thank you so much. Hopefully those of you in the room can hear us. Got to make sure we got the C-SPAN audience included. Well, Deborah, thank you again so much for being here today. There's really nowhere else that I would rather be on a day as important as this, and I'm incredibly grateful that you've taken the time to come and chat with us a bit about Austin. You know, the last time that I saw you was just a couple days ago at right before the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and we were talking about how you got a very, very, very brief opportunity to meet with President Biden. Can you tell us a little bit, what did you tell him? What did he tell you?
I was really fortunate to be able to have just a few minutes with the president, and also Dr. Biden was with him, which was lovely to meet her for the first time. The most important message I had for the president is that in spite of the fact that he gave a very distinct directive to the National Security Council on May 2nd of 2022, and he told them to get a meeting, to listen to the Syrians, to find out what they wanted, and to work with them. There was no action taken on that by the National Security Council until the following February of 2023. And even those engagements have been less than sincere, and I wanted the president to know that his directive has somewhat been ignored. That was the most important message that I had for him, and I hope that that will bring a change in the behavior of the National Security Council.
I mean, I'm curious because I know you've had several meetings with President Biden, you've met with a lot of officials in the US government. I mean, are you satisfied with the responses at this point? How do you kind of feel about what you've been told and how the working relationship has been?
The working relationship has been good. They're very open to engaging with me, which I appreciate. But what I really want is for them to engage with the Syrians. I can stay home and keep being the mom, keep being the homemaker, and they can go and engage with the Syrian government rather than engaging with me. That would be the thing that I really would rather have happen.
And I also wanted to ask a bit, because I think a lot of times when people first hear about Austin Tice, I've had this experience, I think you might have as well, and they ask how long he's been detained for, and you say more than 11 years, almost 12 years at this point. There is, I think, a question that comes up a lot where folks say, well, how do you know that we can still bring him home? And I wanted to see how you respond to those folks, because I think it's something that often comes up around Austin, and it's something you have a really powerful answer to. Right.
Usually when I'm asked that question, I have to say, yes, I have no doubt. I get information about Austin. I can't share it with you. I can't share my source with you. But I can tell you, without a doubt, Austin is exceedingly eager to walk free. And I hope we can see that happen before he has to mark that day, however he's marking his time. I just hope he doesn't have to mark the day that he has been detained for 12 years. I hope we can get this done before August.
And I know the National Press Club and many of our partners out there are going to be doing everything we can with you completely 100% in making sure that we can get Austin home. Can you just provide a bit of an update right now on what the latest is with Austin's case, with Syria, just really where things stand?
Okay, so you can see my notes are a wreck. But I do have an answer to that question, and I want to share it with you. So let me see if I can find it here.
Take your time.
So the thing that's most important right now to me is we're trying to find. There was a meeting in Damascus in 2020 with the SPIHA and the National Security, part of the National Security Council, went and had a meeting with the Syrians in Damascus. And somewhere there is a report about that meeting. We have never received that report. And we found out about it from an article by Sonia Smith in the Texas Monthly Magazine. And the Texas Monthly Magazine was very conscientious about making sure that it was accurate. And so we are asking now for our proof of that, because part of that meeting was that if certain conditions were met, there could be a proof of life offered. This was September of 2020. And I really think that if you could see that proof, it would really move the needle for Austin. It would move the needle, and it would make you more engaged. It would make the government more engaged. God willing, it would make the State Department more engaged and more committed to bringing Austin home, rather than throwing up their hands and saying, well, my goodness, it's been almost 12 years. So that is a hugely important thing that we found out through the Texas Monthly writing, and had no idea. It was quite a surprise to us.
Which is really surprising, given how many folks that you've spoken to in the government, how many contacts you have, and how active you've been in coming up to DC and making sure that Austin is being kept front of mind, and that the case on him is progressing at this point. I know we also recently had Bashar al-Assad come out, say there were some discussions with the U.S., allude to that. It seems like Austin might be a part of that as well. I just wanted to see if you had any particular thoughts on that, or if you've had any discussions around that you might be able to share. I know some stuff is confidential, of course.
There have been engagements, but they've been more of performances to say that they've had engagements, rather than genuine, sincere engagement with the 3 steps that it requires. If someone right now during this meeting is capturing your dog, and you are going to have to release your dog, you're going to have 3 things that you need to do. You're going to need to engage, you're going to need to have dialogue, and you are going to have to make a concession to get your dog back. And it's exactly the same with Austin in Syria. There is going to have to be sincere engagement. There is going to have to be dialogue. And yes, at the very end, there is going to have to be concession. That is how hostage situations are remedied. And Austin is waiting, and our government, as we have seen for the last 7 months, is exceedingly capable of taking those 3 steps, should they desire.
When you talk about those steps, you talk about engagement. I think there's one interesting piece of legislation. It didn't get a lot of attention. It wasn't one of those big bills that everyone fought over. H.R. 3202, the Assad Regime Anti-Normalization Act of 2023. It has already passed the House. It is now gone over to the Senate. Debra, can you talk a little bit about this bill and what its passage could mean for Austin?
Okay, yes, I can. I was in a roundtable before the House Foreign Affairs Committee this week, talking specifically about this bill and how it affects Austin. And this is, the thing is, this bill is a really hateful bill. It even has a hateful title that talks about something like against the Assad regime in Syria or something, a title like that. And what it calls for is no engagement by the United States government, no engagement by businesses doing business in America, and no engagement by our allies. That is entirely ridiculous. And the impact on Austin by his government would be a life sentence. If we cannot engage, we cannot bring Austin home. And so I want to talk about who is behind this bill and how did this bill get approved on the floor with suspended rules, 389 representatives signed on to this bill. Those that have been asked to talk about what the bill is and what it's about don't know. They can't tell me what they signed for. They just knew, here's this bill, I'm going to see my constituents in 2 days, want to get a long list of bills completed. That's how that happened. So the real power behind the bill is the US-based Syrian opposition lobby. This lobby is trying to keep alive a civil war that is 13 years old and is over. I can tell you that the United States had a war between the states that lasted 5 years. There are people in the United States right now that would revisit that conflict. But I think we all agree that conflict is over. And the Syrian Arab League agrees that the war in Syria is over. There are embassies, especially the UAE, has opened their embassy in Damascus. It is peopled with an ambassador that has been accepted by Bashar al-Assad. It is over. So why are these people continuing to push the importance of this conflict? These are people in our country. This bill is a huge win for that lobbying, but a horrid loss for the Syrian people living in tents in Syria, living in tents in Lebanon, living in tents in Jordan. This is not a bill friendly to these people that need to have their lives rebuilt. The Syrian opposition was funded originally by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE. They have stopped funding that opposition long ago. And that will tell you a lot. I challenge you as investigative reporters to look into who in America is now funding the Syrian opposition. They are very active on Capitol Hill, I can tell you, to get 389 representatives to sign this bill without even reading it. The United States government needs to wake up. The State Department, which is a vigorous defender of this Syrian opposition group, needs to wake up. Our Congress needs to wake up. The conflict is over. The time has come for rebuilding.
That was a very, very strong words, Debra, and I think also important light kind of being shed. You know, I cover Congress, and there are always this chunk of bills that tend to go very quickly throughout the week, and it's very notable, I think, that in a lot of your interactions with lawmakers, they haven't been able to tell you really what the bill does, and it seems like realize that there are some implications to their vote for it. And obviously, I know that there's work being done to kind of have the education campaign in the Senate. I also just wanted to ask, what do you see right now as the biggest obstacles to Austin's case?
That is the biggest obstacle to Austin's case, is this insistence that we cannot engage with Syria, and then our government kind of being in the middle of that. So they have to perform engaging because the president gave them that directive, but they're walking a tightrope, I guess. And that is the problem. Our government needs to have a determination and a commitment to Austin that we have seen with other hostages for the last 7 months. If Austin had that kind of commitment, that kind of dedication, he would have been home long ago.
And when you talked to lawmakers earlier this week at the panel, what was their response?
It was mixed. It was mixed. Some of the people felt that I was very much out of line to speak so strongly against that bill. And my congressman, Congressman Al Green, lucky for Austin, was very supportive that this is, you know, we've got HR 3202 in the House, we've got 2254 at the UN, but these are all inhumane for the Syrian people. This is not the road that we want to be on. We need to get on the right track.
Debra, I want to kind of pivot the conversation a little bit, just because, you know, we talk about Austin so much and our desire to have him come home, to free him, how that can happen. Can we just spend a minute maybe talking just about Austin, who he is as a person, what is he like? Just kind of give us a sense of this individual who I feel we spent so much talking about the strategy and everything around him. We haven't spent a minute talking about him, and I just wanted to give you the chance to do that.
Okay, it's going to be more than a minute.
Go for it.
This is my firstborn son, right? This is the one that made me a mom. And the choices that he has made in his life have just made this mom over the moon. He's always been strong-willed, very strong-willed. When he puts his mind to something, that is the way we're going. And, you know, he's an Eagle Scout. He's a decorated captain in the United States Marine Corps. He decided to serve his country after 9/11. He felt like that he was called to that. It wasn't something he had been thinking of prior to that. He is the best big brother you could ever want. All the tropes about big brothers, he feels them. He loves being the oldest. We have 7. And his youngest sister still misses him horribly. He was her mentor. She now has a master's degree. She served in the Peace Corps. But every decision that she made it at the last minute because she kept hoping and hoping that her brother would come home and be able to help him make those decisions. He only knows one of his nieces. She was 3 when he was detained. Every Friday, they would have a Zoom together, and they would sing the song, Friday, Friday, gotta get down on Friday. No matter where Austin was, he was sheltering in a stairwell in Syria, and he still kept his Friday obligation to his 3-year-old niece. He's just an amazing, loving person with a huge, huge personality, for sure.
Debra, thank you so much for sharing that with us, for being here today, and for all of your advocacy, and for, you know, in journalism we often talk about speaking truth to power, and I know that that's something that you've done many, many times over and over again. Please know that we at the Press Club are behind you 100%. We fully support you, and we cannot wait to be able to welcome Austin himself to the Press Club one day very soon. Thank you again, Debra.
Thank you, Emily. You guys are amazing.
All right, if you just want to I can double fist for a second here.
Okay.
All right, next we will be calling to the stage the president of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, Stephen Kappas. And he's going to be chatting with us a little bit about the case of Alsu Kumasheva. Stephen?
Thank you so much.
Good to see you too. Well, Stephen,
Thank you.
Yes, no, thank you so much for being here with us today. Alsu's case is, a year ago, there were only 2 reporters, and now, unfortunately, we have a third. I just wanted to see if you could just begin maybe talking a little bit about Alsu's case, where things stand. I know there are some complexities that come with it. She is an American citizen, but she also has Russian citizenship, and that has seemed to make a few things more difficult for her.
Well, Alsu is our colleague from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. She's worked there for more than 25 years now. She is an American citizen. She made a decision that changed her life to go back to Russia because her mother was ill. When she entered the country, she was able to visit with her mother, with her family. And then when she went to leave, she was prevented from leaving. She's now been imprisoned for more than 200 days, which is a significant amount of time. It pales in comparison to what Austin and Evan have been through, but to a family, this is yet another family that has been ripped apart simply because she's a journalist. She's a mom, she's a wife, and she was acting as a caring daughter when she went back to Russia. And she's still held. The charges make no sense. They came at her because she had not declared herself as a foreign agent. It almost doesn't matter what the charges are because none of them are just. This is an unjustified wrongful detention, and we are doing everything we can to keep the spotlight on her. I will thank you personally, Emily. You've been great. The National Press Club has joined with the likes of the Committee to Protect Journalists and worldwide press freedom organizations to keep the spotlight on her case, and we have no doubt that that has helped raise her profile. Just this morning, we saw an announcement from President Biden calling for the unconditional and immediate release for Alsu, for Austin, and for Evan. And the president's words are strong and powerful, and they should be heeded.
Absolutely, and we do, of course, appreciate that, during the White House Correspondents' Dinner, Biden also made similar remarks, and we will be with you guys, again, every step of the way. I mean, it's very important work, and we're proud to be able to partner with you on it, even though we wish we didn't have to partner with you on it, because we wish this never happened in the first place. One of the most baffling things, I think, about Alsu's detention is that the United States State Department has yet to declare Alsu as wrongfully detained, even though it is obvious to everyone involved that that is exactly what she is. Stephen, can you talk a little bit about that circumstance and maybe also a little bit, wrongful detention, it's more than just a label, it's more than just words. This has actual real-world impacts on Alsu now, and will have impacts on her when she is freed.
Well, we don't think there's any doubt that Alsu meets the criteria for being declared wrongfully detained. And we know that the State Department has given due consideration to this. We think that this deliberative process has gone on for a long time, and we're ready to welcome the day when that designation comes. We think it will come at some point. But we've also heard from the State Department and from other American officials that Alsu's case is front and center. They are continuing to pursue efforts regardless of whether the designation exists. They are continuing to pursue efforts to seek her release. But the designation, as you say, is not just a title. It would afford opportunities for Alsu to be visited in prison by U.S. officials. to get, it would open up a whole other avenue of communications about her situation. It would allow efforts to commence to try to engage with Russia to secure her immediate release. And so yes, we look forward to that day that happens. We know that it doesn't automatically change her situation. There are Americans who've had this designation and are still behind bars today. You know, all you have to do is look at Evan's situation to underscore how, look, the United States government is going to do everything they can. I believe that to my core. As somebody who grew up in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, I'm a true American and I'm a believer in this country. And I believe that they will do everything they can to bring these journalists home. At the same time, Russia, in this case, they're the bad actors in this equation. And they have a seat at the table, if you will, in deciding the fate of the people who are held there. And so there is no justification for keeping a mom of two wonderful girls imprisoned, for keeping a loving spouse imprisoned for no good reason. Also should be home, and we look forward to the day. And we actually think that this is something, that point about her being a mom and a loving wife is something that is valued inside Russia. And so for whatever the reason, bring her home.
Absolutely. And I know that Alsu's husband, Pavel, was here in D.C. this week. I know he was at the Correspondents' Dinner. We got to have a couple events with him here at the Press Club. I've also had the chance to meet Alsu's daughters, Miriam and Bibi. And wow, just two incredible young women who are just willing to really go out, advocate for their mom in what must be just an absolute devastating situation for them, but just a lot of poise, a lot of grace. Can you talk a little bit what it's been like to work with the family at this time?
Yes. It's tough not to get emotional when you think about those young women. They've had to grow up awfully fast over the last half a year, and they've been brilliant, poised. I've walked with them through the halls of Congress, and they've interacted with members of Congress. They've spoken forcefully on, places like CBS News and others, to CNN. I saw Bibi, Alsu's daughter Bibi, who's 15, do an interview with Jake Tapper on CNN. And in the midst of it, Jake said, well, Bibi, what would you like to say if you had an opportunity? What would you like to say to, I believe it was directly to Putin? And any of us who were given that opportunity to say something like that would take a moment and probably be a little bit nervous. This young woman waited while CNN figured out which camera to have her speak to. And then with great poise, she delivered a beautifully powerful message on behalf of her mom. Miriam and Bibi come by the offices now and then. The last time I saw Alsu, actually it was the first time I met her, was at a company picnic that we had in Prague, where Radio Free Europe is headquartered. And Alsu and the girls were there with Pavel, and those are the kinds of people who dedicate themselves to the mission of our organization. And so, yeah, for 25 years, more than 25 years, she's been an integral part of this organization, and yet she's just one of so many who come to work knowing the risks, knowing the dangers, and knowing that these playbooks that the Kremlin has come up with for cracking down on journalists are being passed around from one place to another to another. Everywhere where RFERL operates is a dangerous environment these days. And so The mission is important. The mission is vital. We're some of the last independent journalists to operate in places all across our coverage area.
Yes, as you noted, I mean, Free Liberty Radio Europe, you guys do an incredible job with providing that clear, consistent news source in areas where that is not always easy, and your reporters certainly face a huge risk. I wanted to see if you could chat a little bit about the overall strategy when it comes to Alsu and getting her home. We've certainly heard reporting about potential prisoner swaps between the U.S. and Russia. Has Alsu come up in any of those? What are you able to share with us at this time?
I'm not sure that we would know. We're not in a position to know things like that. We read accounts in the same publications that you do about what may or may not be happening. But look, right now we're focused on the day-to-day. We're concerned about her conditions inside prison. We're concerned that during her last court appearance, she was able to speak to some of the gathered media in the courtroom, and she said that her own health was starting to fail in some areas. And that, by the way, was the first time that Alsu's family had been able to hear her voice. They've had no contact with her. And so we're worried about her conditions on a daily basis. We will do anything to improve those conditions. The wrongful wrongfully detained designation would help with that for sure. But beyond that, all I can say is we don't know what type of machinery is at work to try to free not just Alsu, but Austin and Evan. And we can only hope that for a successful conclusion. It's taken far too long in the case of my two colleagues over here, and we admire the strength of Debra and the compassion around which the Wall Street Journal has gathered in support of their colleague. We stand with them. We call for their immediate release as well, and we look forward to the day when this podium is a little more crowded with some people who are going to have a hell of a story to tell.
We are very much looking forward to welcoming Alsu to the National Press Club. And Steve, thank you so much for all the work that you guys, that Pavel, that the family is doing in regards to Alsu. Again, I mean, I feel like a broken record here, but we are 100% behind Alsu. We will actually be having an announcement in regards to Alsu a little bit later this afternoon. I've been told I'm not supposed to spoil it now, but that you should stay tuned around maybe like 2:30 or so.
Thank you so much again for your
Really
personal
appreciate
support
it.
and for the National Press Club and for everybody who has taken note of what's taken place. These unjust detentions must end immediately. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. And last, but of course, most certainly not least, I'd like to invite to the stage Paul Beckett. You know what? I know he has assistant editor for the Wall Street Journal. I just like to think of him as the editor-in-chief of getting Evan back home. That, as far as I'm concerned, is your official title. And I also wanted to take a minute to thank you. Paul did something incredibly generous. You know, for just going around the press club, we have a lot of different front pages. We have prints of front pages. We have framed front pages upstairs. We try and really get those incredibly historic and important moments in our country. And today, we have gotten to add one more. The Wall Street Journal's incredibly powerful front page from the 1-year anniversary of Evan's detention. It is currently being displayed in our lobby. Huge thanks to the staff who hustled that around. And I think we got it like last night at like 8 p.m. And like this morning, I was like, hey guys. So huge thank you to the staff. And of course, huge thank you to Paul for having such a powerful reminder that we now have clearly displayed so anyone who comes to the club will see it. And thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks to the National Press Club, and thank you to all of you for joining this morning. We greatly appreciate it.
Paul, I want to just jump right into it because the Wall Street Journal did report at one point that there was a potential deal on the table. It had been floated by the White House. Basically, there was an assassin who's currently held captive in Germany that Russia is interested in having freed. The U.S. and the U.S. and Germany, rather, were having certain conversations about it. Alexei Navalny was a key piece of that negotiation. And then, unfortunately, several days later, we learned of Navalny's death. And I wanted to see if you could kind of bring us up to speed. Is there still a deal on the table? Is there still discussions going on? Where do things stand?
Thanks, Emily. What we've seen in the last 30 months of Evan's incarceration are these glimpses of conversations that have gone on between the United States and Russia. Initially, we heard about the first one, a deal potentially for Evan and for Paul Whelan, of course, who's been there for 5 years. And that proposal was made sometime late November. It was rejected. Then, as we've reported, there was some discussion of a potential deal that would have involved Navalny. And since then, we've been assured by the government, US government, that they continue to work very hard on it. Roger Carstens, the special presidential envoy, has said a new proposal is being put together, which we find very encouraging. The issue for us is that this has to be done now. We have a window now to make a difference in securing Evan's release, and we would like to see the US government take full opportunity of that. They themselves have identified this window. It runs to June 30th, which is the end of the current pretrial detention that Evan is held under. The reason it's so important now is what happens next is completely opaque to us, and we see challenges ahead potentially. We don't know if we assume that Evan will go to trial at some point on this baseless charge, but we haven't been told. We haven't seen any evidence of what Russia purports to have that may have caused this baseless charge to be filed in the first place. We don't know if we would see a trial. We don't know how long a trial would last. There is so much that is in the hands of the Russian government that we feel that this window running to June 30th is really such an important time for the US government and the Russian governments to make progress on releasing Evan. And it is one of those equations where there is only one definition of success. We really appreciate all the work that has gone into trying to get this done up to this point. But him being home is the only thing that counts for success in this equation. And we'd like to see it done now.
And now is really, and I mean, it was always now, I think, from the moment he was first taken, but this is a particularly critical time.
It's when we look ahead, it's the opacity of what is ahead, and any uncertainty that is added into that equation is worrying for us, it's worrying for Evan, it's worrying for his family, and we don't want to put him through that.
You met with President Biden last weekend as well. Can you discuss your conversations with him? Obviously, again, I know some of the stuff is classified, but if anything you can share from your meeting and interaction with him.
That was a private meeting just with his family, with Evan's family, and with President Biden, First Lady, and Secretary Blinken, among others. And we're very grateful for that. I know the family is very touched by that. And President Biden reiterated his promise to bring Evan home. And we appreciated that. And we would like to see that delivered on as soon as possible.
Biden did put out that statement today where he mentioned Austin and Evan and Alsu, and he also mentioned taking some actions against those who were opposing and preventing press freedom. These included sanctions, these included cancellation of certain visas. And I'm wondering if you think that that is an effective message to send for the White House today.
We'll leave that for the White House to, they obviously have their reasons for doing that, and if it brings the release of detained journalists home, then obviously we're in favor of it. I don't think the White House would say that it is, and we certainly hope that it isn't a substitute for meaningful action on securing the release of Evan and the other journalists held overseas.
Absolutely. I mean, the sanctions and visas, they're not nothing, but as you said, there's only one definition of success here.
Correct.
Former President Trump also has weighed in. He told Time magazine that Evan should be released and will be released. And I just want to see what you make of those remarks.
We're grateful for the fact that within a matter of days, both the current president, the former president, and the two leading presidential candidates both called for his release. both committed to bringing him home. This has been a bipartisan issue since the beginning, and to the extent that we are receiving, a widespread support across the whole political spectrum is very important for us. And I think it speaks to the fundamental understanding that what Evan has been deprived of and the freedoms that the press has been deprived of in Russia and elsewhere really go beyond party politics and are fundamental to Evan's rights and the rights of a free press, and the rights of a free press, I think, something that we have seen in the last year that the whole country cares about.
And I definitely would, agree that especially when it comes to someone who covers government, you do see that bipartisanship when you start talking about detained journalists, press freedom, even if maybe at some point that doesn't actually come across in some of their votes. I also wanted to ask, because you too were in front of the House Foreign Affairs Committee this week, and I just wanted to see what you thought about the discussion that was had. Was there any sort of change that this hearing brought about? What was the headline that you would have taken away from it?
It's always good to see interest in this issue on Capitol Hill. I think one of the things we've seen in matters of press freedom and in matters of detaining journalists overseas are a change in the actors who do this. The Wall Street Journal was unfortunate enough to have the tragedy of Danny Pearl's murder in 2002. That was at the hands of extremists in Karachi, in Pakistan. Now we have a reporter who's detained by the Kremlin. That transition says a lot about the changing landscape of who wants to target reporters and the targeting of press freedoms around the world. Now state actors are the most common party for detaining journalists. And I think one of the things that has come up both at that Foreign Affairs Committee hearing and in other discussions in Washington and other capitals around the world are the countries that stick up for press freedom adequately prepared to handle that change in the dynamic of reporter oppression. So that is something that I think we'll see Congress look at, does the Special Presidential Envoy's Office, which does a very good job in so many ways. Is it adequately resourced, adequately prepared for state actors to be the principal culprits here? Does the process by which I know in Alsu's case, in Debra's case, in Austin's case, and in the case of many other detainees who aren't journalists, it's very hard to navigate the US government on these topics. And is there sufficient transparency about how that process works? Those are the sorts of questions that we heard at that hearing, that I've heard elsewhere on Capitol Hill. Are US allies as prepared to deal with this equation as the United States? And I think you will see the United States in months and years ahead try to bring more Western allies on board to come up with some kind of way to stop this from happening in the first place. Because ultimately deterrence is what we want. I really, really, really hope Evan is not an equation in those discussions, because I hope he is back very, very soon.
Absolutely. And you and I were actually having an interesting discussion last night just about how the U.S. handles some of these detained reporter cases versus how some of other countries handle them. And I was really surprised to hear there was such a big difference between us and other Western allies and how we view this.
Every country deals with it the way that they want. Some say that they don't do things that we all know that they do. We are grateful for the fact that the U.S. government engages in this. The U.S. government is very public about its obligation to bring its citizens home. And obviously, there are so many of its citizens overseas that I'm sure the U.S. government would like to bring home, and we would like to see brought home. But we give them a lot of credit for taking it so seriously. I think there are many other governments that don't extend themselves so much for their citizens overseas. And that's the piece where I think governments are starting to recognize that they will have to be more involved, and ideally involved in some kind of common deterrence that would stop it happening in the first place.
I also wanted to ask, since you did mention, of course, the June 30th deadline as far as the next hearing for Evan. I just wanted to see if you have a sense of what might happen. I mean, obviously, what should happen is that he should be released now, and that should never have to happen. But do we have a sense that Russian prosecutors are preparing for trial? What is your sense as far as what's happening over in Russia?
It's so hard to tell. It's a fog. We assume there'll be a trial. If he goes to trial because of the nature of the charge, the nature of the Russian system, even though the charge is completely baseless, we fully expect him to be convicted. Once he's convicted, who knows? You know, we just don't even, we haven't been told, we haven't seen the evidence, there's no schedule. We don't want to have to find out.
And I think that's some of the opaqueness that you were talking about and some of the concerns if this doesn't happen soon. And Paul, I wanted, kind of on a bit of a personal note, just to ask you a little bit about what the last year and 2 months have been like for you. Because when this began, you were Washington bureau chief, one of the most powerful newspapers, and you've really come into this role where you are full-time working for Evan, working with his family. And I'm just kind of curious, as someone who has really jumped into this role with both feet, what has that experience been like for you?
I've worked in many dangerous places around the world and run reporters in dangerous places around the world, and there is nothing as a colleague, editor, or manager that compares to having one of your colleagues an innocent man sitting helplessly in jail in a hostile regime. It is puts really, 30 years of journalism in perspective to have to deal with that. Evan's family is extraordinary, so they have been an inspiration to all of us working on his case to keep going.
I know, yeah. Evan's sister, his parents, I mean, they've just been, the chances I've had to chat with Danielle in particular, it is very incredible to see the amount of resilience that she has. And I mean, even Evan himself, I think a lot of us were really struck to see that photo of Evan in that glass case making the heart sign. And the resilience that must take to be in the position that he is to facing the uncertainty that he is facing. Can you talk a little bit about the story behind that photo, and when you saw it, what was your reaction?
Well, we knew when we hired him he was an excellent reporter. That's why we hired him. We've discovered what an extraordinary young man he is for his fortitude. He's 23 hours in a cell. Every day he exercises, he meditates, he reads, he writes letters, he does everything he can to stay strong, and he has stayed strong. And we're always grateful every day to hear that he's doing okay. And I think what we saw there, that was an appeal of a pretrial detention extension. Right? It's every single decision that's been made about Evan we have appealed, and every single appeal we have lost. However, it gives us an opportunity to see him, albeit in that glass cage. And interestingly, that was a hearing where other media, for the first time, was allowed access. So I think he knows from his letters that the world is supporting him, but he got to see some of his friends in the media in Russia, where he's worked his entire career. And I think seeing them in the courtroom was what prompted him to give both his thumbs up and his heart sign, and we were so touched and inspired to see it.
Well, I'm happy to hear that even in this horrific situation that Evan knows that he has so many people who are fighting for him, and I hope that Alsu knows, and I hope that Austin knows that they have hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals who are working for their release, who are supporting individuals like Paul, yourself, the family, like Debra, like Stephen, like Pavel, like Miriam and Bibi, and that we will not continue, we will not rest until we get to welcome Evan to the National Press Club. And Paul, just thank you again for all that you've done. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank
Emily.
you for being
Thanks
here
to the
today.
National Press Club. Thanks to Debra. Thanks to Steve. You know, it's not a club that anybody wants to be a part of, but it's a community of very strong and admirable people, and we're really grateful.
No, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you. All right, and I'll just say one last note before we wrap up, that our democracy, our press freedom, it's going to be tested this year like it's never going to be tested before. I don't think that's a big surprise. I know in America, we are gearing up to see what the future is of the press, but I will assure you that we here at the National Press Club and our allies all over DC and all over the US and all over the world, we will not stop fighting for journalists. Journalism is not a crime. Austin and Evan and Alsu must be freed. And thank you guys all so much for being here today and for supporting our efforts to make sure that these journalists come home. Thank you.